Welcome to Mind, Muscle, and Metabolism, the Jade Teta podcast. Here you get the in-depth science and practical tools needed to change your body, optimize your health, and elevate your mindset. I'm Dr. Jade Teta, and here is what I want you to know. You are different. You are as unique on the inside chemically as you are on the outside physically. And those differences matter. They matter because there is only one rule to achieving optimal health, fitness, and body change. That rule: do what works for you. My goal is to help you understand exactly how. I'm so excited you're here. Your transformation starts right now. Okay, welcome to today's show. This is the Jade Teta podcast. Today we are talking about erections, which is a topic that obviously men and women, or anyone romantically interested in a man, is going to be concerned about, but especially the man with the penis is going to be most concerned with his erections. This is one of those things in clinical practice that will make men show up and be very concerned. As a matter of fact, we oftentimes talk about pain points that help people change their lifestyles, pain points in weight loss and medicine. And besides the prognosis of death, the biggest pain point for men other than death is going to be issues with their erections. If a man starts to get less firm erections, erections that are inconsistent, erections that are non-existent, or erections that come on and then are lost, they are going to do everything in their power to try to understand what is going on. And so I'm going to tackle this subject for men, because in my age range, it is one of the things that all of my friends are asking me about all of the time. But more importantly, and by the way, my age range is early 40s. Well, I guess I'm 44 now, so I'm getting to my mid 40s. But what's interesting is that in clinical practice, we are seeing more and more young men dealing with erection issues. I'm talking about men in their early 20s. I've even dealt with one person giving advice who was in their teens with erection issues, and 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond. And so this is a big issue. And also it brings up the discussion of testosterone therapies, TRT, testosterone replacement therapy. And I'll touch a little bit on that as well, but that's something that I'll be dealing more and more with in this podcast. And I also have a free course on TRT and erections that I will tell you a little bit more about in this podcast as well. So let's get into this. One of the things that we need to understand is frameworks. Frameworks is the way I like to teach, and I have one for erections that is very, very interesting and useful. And it is the 3 B's, B as in boy, the 3 B's of erection. So what are those? Brain, biochemistry, and blood flow. And so just to kind of help you understand how this works, the seat of erection, or the biggest place where erections occur, is not actually in the penis. It is actually in the brain. And so the brain is the triggering event that really kicks off an erection. And then that brain will then send nervous system signals down the spinal cord into the penile tissue. And that nervous system impulse will then elicit some biochemical reactions that we'll talk about. And then those biochemical reactions then help us to get this blood flow response, this coordinated blood flow response that has increased blood flow rushing in, and then dilation or constriction, rather, of the blood vessels going out due to biochemical events, plus just the pressure buildup of fluid, hydrostatic pressure buildup of fluid in the penis, which shuts down some of the other vessels that lead out of the penis, and you get this hydrostatic pressure that builds up, and you get an erect penis as a result of that. So the brain signals translate into the biochemical signals, which translate into the physiological erection that we actually can see. So let's talk first about the brain. You know, it's really interesting in sexual research. There's an awful lot of talk about men being more sort of biologically based, in that if they see something that is sexually relevant, for example, their romantic partner walking across the room naked, or a erotic or pornographic image, they will elicit and stimulate sexual centers in the brain, which automatically result in an erection, which is sort of this one-to-one response, something sexually suggestive, and boom, an erection. And we oftentimes talk about women as being more contextual in their sexual response, that in order for them to be aroused sexually and perform sexually, they kind of need a little bit more context. This is the general way it's described. And actually, there is an amazing book on female sexuality called Come As You Are by a researcher by the name of Emily Nagoski. She's a PhD, and it's probably one of the best books I have read. I read a lot of research in this realm, and she does an amazing job of taking some very high-level PhD research and distilling it down to the lay person to understand the science, which is really the goal of this podcast as well. One of the things I like to do is take the metabolism stuff, take the high-end science, give it to you in a way that is at least, still complex, but at least useful for the lay person or professional who's interested in these subjects. But Emily Nagoski's book, Come As You Are, talks an awful lot about the contextual elements of female sexuality and the idea that women can be turned on and have this sort of discordant effect some of the time where they might be turned on and want sex, but they may not be wet at the same time. And we don't normally think of this in discussions of men. Rarely do we think of discordant reactions like we do with women, where women can be turned on and be wet or not turned on and be wet. And so this is not always the case, but this is commonly talked about in the sexual research literature for women, this discordant effect and this sort of contextual basis for sexuality. And this is actually true for men as well. It's just not talked about enough, and it's the first place I'll start with this. Just to give you an example of what I'm talking about contextually with erection. Let's say you're a man, and the romantic partner walks into the room naked and begins to rub on you, start kissing on your neck, and coming on to you sexually. Well, typically, a man will respond with an erection with that kind of stimulation, right? But under the wrong context, he may not. And so what may happen is, let's say that he's got a deadline on work and he's on his Mac computer frantically trying to get out a deadline, or has had a very, very busy, stressful day, or has emotionally been hurt or wounded or anything like that. And what we can see in that response is that he may not get the erection. And so the partner might be like, well, what's going on there? It's simply that he is stressed out and overwhelmed, and the context is wrong, because contextually his brain is elsewhere stressing about other things. And that's the first thing you need to know about the sexual stimulation in men. Men and stress are really incompatible with erection. Stress is incompatible with erection, both acute stress and chronic stress. So let me explain how this works. The autonomic nervous system, the ANS, automatic nervous system or autonomic nervous system, is divided into two branches. The parasympathetic branch, which is the rest, digest, relaxation, and recovery side of our nervous system, and then the sympathetic side of our nervous system, which is the fight, flight, freeze, excitement response of the nervous system. Well, this has to be balanced in individuals for them to get an adequate erection. To remember this, think point and shoot. P for point equals parasympathetic. In other words, in order for you to get an erection, to get hard, you need to be relaxed and turn on the parasympathetic side of the nervous system. And this is very important. So if you're overly stressed out, that's a sympathetic response. You may not get an erection. This comes into play, by the way, women and men. First time, let's say, on a date and a man is nervous, just because he doesn't get an erection may not mean he doesn't like you. It may mean he likes you a whole lot, and he's just nervous about the encounter and is sort of stressed out. So that acute stress can lead to lack of erection and lack of performance when first meeting someone. Also, alcohol can throw off the automatic nervous system and make you more parasympathetic acutely. So 1 or 2 glasses of alcohol may aid erection, but 3, 4, 5 may suppress erection because it throws off this balance of the automatic nervous system. And so acute stress is important contextually for the brain, and any sort of imbalance in the automatic nervous system between parasympathetic and sympathetic acutely can lead to issues with erection. Also, chronic stress is a really big deal as well. The command and control center of the metabolism is the hypothalamus, and this area of the brain communicates with the pituitary gland, which then releases hormones that turn on sperm production and testosterone production in the testicles. Well, chronic stress can irritate the hypothalamus, for lack of a better term, irritate the hypothalamus, interrupting these signals. And so those of you who are biochemists, the signals are hypothalamus releases gonadotropin releasing hormone to the pituitary, which then releases follicle stimulating hormone, and LH, the same kind of hormones that are talk to the female ovaries, talk to the male testicles. And this is all called the hypothalamus pituitary gonadal axis. And this whole thing basically is the coordinated effort between the brain and the testicles to release testosterone. Now, acutely, testosterone then obviously has all kinds of effects for men, helps us build muscle, has mood enhancing effects, focusing and motivation effects, increases libido. Testosterone also primes the tissues of the penis for some of the other biochemical reactions that occur for erection. And so this testosterone is important for erections. And actually, believe it or not, men make estrogen as well. And estrogen is also important for erections, but you don't want too much. And so one of the primary indicators, perhaps, as we start to move from brain to biochemistry, is the ratio of free testosterone to estrogen. This is one of the big mistakes that individuals will make when they go on testosterone replacement therapy, because you can have people who have erections that are absolutely fine and strong who have low total testosterone, and people who have very poor erections who have high total testosterone. And so testosterone total is not a great indicator of erection quality. However, free testosterone and the estrogen ratio is a better predictor. And so too high estrogen with low free components of testosterone may mean that the penile tissues are not getting primed by testosterone in the way that they should, which means they can't respond to some of the biochemical actions that are required for an erection. And so the hypothalamus, the pituitary, the testicles all work together, secreting all these hormones and then feed back on the hypothalamus. Chronic stress, this would be chronic emotional stress, breakups, romantic hurts, grief from loss of loved ones to death, and more importantly, stress at work maybe, sleep deprivation. People who snore and sleep apnea notoriously will be under stress, and these things can cause problems. Individuals who have stress due to lack of good quality dietary and exercise lifestyle, too many fats and carbohydrates, not enough movement, that's a stress to the metabolism. And what a lot of people don't think about is over-exercising and under-eating any kind of macros or calories. Decreased carb diets can sometimes cause issues with testosterone. Decreased protein diets have been shown to potentially lower testosterone and may cause erection issues, and decreased fat diets also. And this goes for micronutrient deficiencies as well, which all can be stresses to the body chronically. So these are important to know in terms of the brain aspects of this. So really quickly, the brain component is a contextual component. Men, you need to be relaxed. Romantic partners of men, you need to help your man get relaxed. We oftentimes think of women contextually sexually in that they need a lot of foreplay and the mood has to be right and they need to feel safe and relaxed. Well, it can be the very same thing with men, setting the mood, lots of good quality foreplay, connection, emotionally having a safe place. And this would especially be true for men who have had any kinds of insecurities around romantic loss, physical abuse. These things can come up with men contextually. And then, of course, understanding the role of acute stress, being nervous or being overwhelmed about things that are going on in your life, or being nervous about a first date can interfere. Alcohol can interfere with the autonomic nervous system. A little bit okay, too much, not good at all. And chronic alcohol use is definitely associated with decreased performance, both with libido and erection quality and endurance for men. And then, of course, these hidden chronic stress responses. stresses of chronic disease, stresses of dieting, either dieting too hard and reducing macronutrients and doing crazy CrossFit and marathon running and all that, or being the couch potato. So chronic dieters and chronic couch potatoes can get into trouble with their erections. So hopefully that helps you understand the brain needs to be primed first. One more thing I'll say about the brain, and this research is mixed. I know people always ask me, but Jade, what about pornography and what about frequent masturbation or frequent sexual stimulation? Does this have an effect on erections in terms of desensitizing the brain to sexual stimuli? Well, the interesting thing is the research is mixed on this. Some research has shown that increased watching pornography can actually aid erection quality. Some has shown that increased pornography use and sexual stimulation and over-masturbation can decrease erection quality. And so obviously the research in this area is not completely flushed out. And one thing we'll talk about here in a minute, but I'll go ahead and mention it now, is that good quality erections need good quality erections, meaning that one of the things that the penis needs is exercise. And so the penis needs to have erections to continually get erections. And so you want that blood flow when you get an erection actually feeds and is nutritive to the penile tissue. And so we'll talk about that a little bit. So this is why masturbation, not necessarily to ejaculation or frequent sexual activity, is really helpful for the penis because it's like exercising the penis. And so we'll talk about that when we get to the blood flow piece. So hopefully that explains some of the brain effects here. Certainly if you're someone who feels like frequent masturbation or frequent pornography is interfering with your erection quality and your libido, you may want to pay attention to that. But it is mixed right now in the research. We can't necessarily say one way or the other based on research. So the brain effects then stimulate the biochemistry. You get these centers of the brain that sort of basically light up, the pleasure centers. They send down signals through the spinal cord into the penile tissue, and at the end of that, there is the release of certain biochemicals, the most important one being nitric oxide, NO. And then nitric oxide stimulates secondary messengers like cyclic GMP that then cause blood flow changes, dilation of arteries and blood vessels leading into the penis, and constriction of vessels leading out of the penis results in this sort of swelling and hydrostatic raising of the penis into an erection. And so this biochemistry has to be there. Now, you might say, okay, Jade, please stop with the biochemical lessons, and what does this mean for my man, or who I want to have good quality erections, or me as a man who wants good quality erections? Well, one of the things we know is that nitric oxide is absolutely essential. You might be getting the signal, the nervous system signal down into the penis, but you also need to have adequate nitric oxide. So there are two ways to get nitric oxide. One is through the conversion of arginine, which is an amino acid, into nitric oxide. So arginine has been shown, believe it or not, to have some supplemental arginine has been shown to have some beneficial effects in helping men maintain or achieve erections because of this nitric oxide production. And also, a little known thing that has come to light over the last 5 to 10 years is the idea that we form nitric oxide when we eat high nitrate foods, which is really an interesting thing. I'll break this chemistry down for you so you can understand the recommendation of what I'm going to recommend dietarily for erections, which is a biochemical piece of this. You have nitrate reducing bacteria in the back of your throat, in the bumpy part of the tongue. They call these the crypts. The crypts of the tongue, that bumpy part in the back of your tongue, contains certain bacteria that take nitrate that you take in through your diet and reduce it into nitrite. Then you swallow that nitrite that is then made into nitric oxide, and that nitric oxide basically then goes throughout the body and has some of its effects. And so you're making nitric oxide inside your body through arginine, but you're also making it through the sort of reduction of dietary nitrate. Well, where do you get dietary nitrate? The biggest sources are green leafy vegetables. And this is interesting because a lot of people get afraid of nitrates because they're like, isn't that the stuff you put on cured meats like bacon and things like that are so that we've heard are dangerous and can lead to colorectal cancers and things like that? Yes, it's the same thing. In those meats, they put in sodium nitrate, and in the fertilizing world and in the ground, these plants fix nitrate. Actually, basically have nitrate in them. And actually, these plants have way, way more nitrate than you can possibly get from cured meats. And the interesting thing is we don't know why there's an association, because there is a loose association, although there is controversy about this, eating cured meats and colorectal cancer. And that has to do with the formation of compounds called nitrosamines, which can be carcinogenic. We believe they are carcinogenic to some of the tissues in the colon. These compounds are probably formed as a result of some of the iron that comes along with some of the meats and other compounds. But with vegetables, this doesn't seem to happen. You don't get this nitrosamine formation. And so nitrates are a huge component for erections. And so what are the richest sources of nitrates in your diet? Well, arugula or rocket lettuce is a huge one. A lot of people talk about beetroot juice, which is also fantastic, but arugula is the big one. And believe it or not, some of the things that we tend to think don't have a lot of nutritive value, arugula, iceberg lettuce, romaine, spinach, obviously arugula and romaine are seen as hugely nutritive compounds, but oftentimes iceberg lettuce and romaine lettuce are kind of seen as the lesser lettuces. Well, they are loaded with nitrate. And so obviously if you want to get this stuff in, eating iceberg lettuce, romaine lettuce, arugula, these things, and beets are your best bet, eating lots and lots of salads basically. And this will then fix that nitrate into nitric oxide, which then aids the penile tissue in erection. This is hugely important. When we think about the penis being able to respond biochemically, we want to think nitric oxide. We want to think cyclic GMP, which we'll talk about in a minute when we talk about Cialis and Viagra and things like that. And we want to think about testosterone and the testosterone estrogen ratio, sort of priming the penile tissue for these biochemical reactions. And so these things are all very, very important. I have a free resource for you that you're going to love if you are a man or a lover of a man who is concerned with testosterone and erections. This course is what you need. It is absolutely amazing at the information it gives. It has over 17 videos that teach you everything you need to know about lifestyle management of testosterone and erections. What you need to do diet-wise, exercise-wise, supplement-wise to maximize testosterone and erections. And it even goes into in-depth information your doctor may have never told you about how to take testosterone replacement therapy, why it's different than anabolic steroids, why it is probably one of the best anti-aging tools that an aging man can have, and how it can protect, maximize, and potentize your erections. If you're a man and you want to get a hold of this, or you are the lover of a man and you want him to have this, check out drjade.com/testosterone-course. That's drjade.com/testosterone-course. Thanks so much. Now back to the podcast. You also see that probably the bioflavonoids that are present in plant materials, especially some of the fruits, pomegranate, there was a recent study showing that eating pomegranate juice can have positive effects on erections. Blueberries have been known to protect the blood vessels that are responsible for being responsive to some of the signals from the brain that come down into the erectile tissue to release nitric oxide. So eating lots of colorful berries are very good erection foods. And of course, arugula and a lot of the lettuces are very good erection foods. Now, one of the things that's really interesting is, as they were doing this research on nitric oxide production in the oral cavity, one of the things that they discovered is that if you use antimicrobial mouth rinses that are high in alcohol, they kill a lot of these bacteria that are actually making or reducing nitrate into nitrite and making nitric oxide. So this is a hidden source of reducing nitric oxide. So if you're a guy who's using Listerine antiseptic mouthwashes and things like that, and you're having issues with your erections and you want to maximize nitric oxide production, you may want to rethink using those types of things. This has been shown in the research a lot, actually, in several different lines of research, and they've actually looked to see that, wow, this really does reduce nitric oxide production in the body through this oral cavity pretty significantly. So what are your alternatives then? Because you obviously you want erections and you want fresh smelling breath as well. those two things seem to go hand in hand. I mean, obviously you're not going to have any fun in the bedroom if you have breath that is horrible as well. So what do you do with this? Well, xylitol containing mouthwashes may actually, in one test tube study that I've seen, aid the production of nitric oxide. And so switch from alcohol-containing mouthwashes like Listerine and things like that, and look for xylitol-containing mouthwashes like Spry mouthwash and things like that. You also can get xylitol-containing gum. And believe it or not, chewing and in saliva, your saliva will sort of concentrate nitrate that you take in through your diet, so that when you chew and you release saliva, you actually will then have that nitrate that was concentrated in your salivary ducts released into the oral cavity, which then is acted on by these bacteria, which then create this nitric oxide. And so chewing may also amp up nitric oxide levels in the body, which is really, really interesting science. We're starting to learn that the gut bacteria, and when I say gut, I mean essentially the digestive tract all the way down from mouth to anus, all these bacteria that are in our oral cavity and in our lower intestines are having profound impact on our metabolism as a whole. And this is an interesting thing. I don't think many guys would think, wow, my oral health has anything to do with my erection health, but this is a direct line that shows it absolutely does. So make sure you're getting your green vegetables in. I would say 4 cups of lettuces per day. This means one big, huge salad is a great way to assure you're getting this nitric oxide into your system. Also, if you like liquids more, beet juice is now widely available. There are also great bioflavonoid-containing juices and berries, pomegranate juice, things like that, blueberries, raspberries, blueberries being one of the richest sources. Also, cocoa is a hugely beneficial thing, perhaps for sexual function in men and women. Cocoa has some cannabinoid-like effects that help to relax the body and focus the body, so it has this nice ANS balancing effect. It also has some of these compounds in it that can raise nitric oxide and help to balance out and heal the blood vessels lining the penis. And so I think of cocoa, I think of blueberries, I think of all these berries, and I think of also especially these lettuces as well. One other thing of note here is that there is another amino acid. A lot of times people have heard of arginine, but there's actually a amino acid called citrulline, and actually one dietary source of citrulline is the rind of watermelon. The white part of watermelon is pretty high in citrulline, and citrulline can have a weak Viagra-like effect because citrulline raises nitric oxide and actually does it through arginine. Believe it or not, if you supplement citrulline, it seems like you're getting more of an arginine nitric oxide response than if you took arginine itself. So something about citrulline is, I think, better absorbed than arginine, and you get a more nitric oxide response. And so these are all of the things that you may want to be doing supplement-wise to balance out sort of the biochemistry. Now, I'll mention, going back to the brain, there is one product, ginsengs, especially Korean ginseng, 900 milligrams per day, that did in one study I saw have a beneficial effect on erection. And we're not exactly sure how this is working, but the ginsengs work probably on the hypothalamus and may have some bioflavonoid type effects as well to protect and balance the lining of the blood vessels leading into the penis. So hopefully all of these things make sense to you. So now we're talking about stress management, reduction of alcohol intake, and then a huge amount of lettuces and salads. Salads need to become your best friend, guys. Lots of berries and bioflavonoid-rich foods like cocos and things like that. And then looking at the amino acid citrulline as being one of the best things you can do. These are the things that are probably going to have way more benefit for you versus all the other things you hear about, like horny goat weed, which has very little research suggesting that it is effective. And most of the things that you will see on the market, these over-the-counter herbal therapies, are using things that are not that effective for erections. You will probably be better off doing pomegranate juice, citrulline, and lots of green leafy lettuces. So hopefully that makes sense. So now we've covered the brain and the biochemistry. Now let's talk about the blood flow and the connection of the biochemistry and the blood flow. So you heard about nitric oxide. Well, nitric oxide is the primary compound that is released from the nerve endings as the nerve signal comes down from the brain. What does nitric oxide do? Well, it's released and it basically stimulates in the cell what's called a second messenger. Now, in biochemistry, a second messenger is sort of like a hormone is sort of a compound that tells one cell in, let's say, one area of the body what to do from another cell. For example, if the brain wants to tell the testicles what to do, it will release a hormone. However, if the testicular cells need to communicate within themselves, if a cell wants to tell parts of its machinery to do things, they use second messengers like cyclic GMP. Cyclic GMP is a compound that actually tells the cell to begin to dilate and open up and cause some of the biochemical changes that cause the blood vessels to open to push more blood through. And this compound is broken down by an enzyme called PDE5, phosphodiesterase. And so when we think about things like Viagra, sildenafil, and Cialis, tadalafil, these are PDE5 inhibitors. The way they're working is they're slowing the breakdown of cyclic GMP, this second messenger that dilates blood vessels. And so when we're thinking about these types of things, you can think about, why would Viagra or tadalafil, Cialis not be working for a man? Well, if the issue is coming from the brain, it might not be working. Or if the issue is coming from biochemical effects, not getting enough nitric oxide or a wrong testosterone, that might be working. But we might be part of the problem. But also, we have to understand that Viagra, Cialis, Stenza, some of these other things are working directly on blood flow. And so what can interfere with blood flow? Well, blood flow is typically interfered with damage to the arteries and arterioles and capillaries that fill the penis. And this is notorious for people who have high blood pressure and high blood sugar, who are the people that have that? Diabetics. Diabetics and pre-diabetics, and people who live the standard Western diet who are insulin resistant and in a pre-diabetic state pretty much most of the time, usually have higher blood pressures and higher blood sugars, which are doing damage to the lining of these arteries, and this can become a problem. Now, how do you triage this? How would you know that your issue is brain or biochem versus blood flow? Well, the morning erection for you guys is a really good indicator that the blood flow piece or the biochemistry piece is actually there, right? So you're getting your morning erection. It means the machinery is actually working well. And so if you're getting the morning erection, you might be like, well, the biochemistry and blood flow stuff seems to be there. Maybe this is a brain effect. However, if your morning erections are not strong or absent, you might start thinking, hey, maybe I'm getting, some diabetic issues here, and I need to look at that. And so this is a great indication here for you. So yes, Cialis, tadalafil are very useful for this, but they're not going to be as useful for you if you don't have some of this other brain stuff understood and some of the biochem stuff understood. So this is important to understand. Obviously, a change in diet of reducing sugars and fats and ramping up vegetable intake is going to be huge. So getting on board with salads, cutting out lots of the high fat, high sugar junk foods, that is going to be the first thing here. And also walking. Walking is going to be huge because walking controls stress. Walking controls blood sugar because it sensitizes the body to insulin, and walking lowers blood pressure. Walking is one of the best things you can do movement-wise, is really important. And then, of course, high-intensity training with weights will raise testosterone levels. And so blood flow is very, very important here. So now you can see the brain, the biochem, and the blood flow and know when to use some of these things or not. And one thing I'll say about Cialis and Viagra that's really important is these things were initially blood pressure drugs. They were being studied for blood pressure, and then they kind of noticed, oh, isn't that interesting? These things actually cause erection. They seem to be centered around the penile tissue. And that was a great, sort of revelatory accidental discovery for the drug industry, because these things have been fantastic for older men and diabetics who are having issues with erections. However, you don't necessarily want to be reliant on these. And the research on that, by the way, is mixed as well. Can you overuse these things and become reliant on them? Some research suggests perhaps. Other research suggests not at all, that the doses remain the same, and that still remains to be worked out. But the final thing I'll say here is that what is the best way if you already have damaged arteries due to diabetes and you were relying on these things? Well, there is a new non-invasive treatment out there now called extracorporeal shockwave therapy. And actually, this has been so promising and is so new, I myself am actually looking at getting into a business opportunity with this, which you may hear more about. But this big, long word, extracorporeal shockwave therapy, is a confusing term for many people. But if you've ever had physical therapy or been to a chiropractic's office, you've probably had this used on some of your joints or muscles. Essentially, if you can imagine, this is sort of like percussive therapy, the same way that you would use one of these high-force massagers on a muscle or a ligament or tendon to drive blood flow into the area and cause collagen remodeling. This is essentially what these machines are doing. What they are doing is you're applying this sort of machine to the base of the penis, and essentially it provides a thump. Actually, it provides a lot of thumps really fast to the penis, causing shear forces inside the penile tissue, which stimulates the penile tissue to release growth factors that then to repair the penis. And so you can kind of think of this almost like exercise, passive exercise for the penis. Just like I talked about the idea that to exercise the penis, the best way to exercise the penis is to give the penis an erection, increase blood flow to the area. That kind of thing. However, if you're not getting erections any longer, you still need to exercise the penis. This is a way to do that. And so extracorporeal shockwave therapy is something that is going to be coming very soon for individuals to avail themselves out, to give themselves an anti-aging treatment to the penile tissues. And essentially, this is really, really exciting research. So this is a crash course in the penis. Just to review really quick before I wrap up this podcast, there are 3 B's to erection: the brain response, the biochem response, and the blood flow response. In the brain response, as a man and as a man's lover, you need to understand that yes, men, like women, are contextual sexually. This can have to do with sexual personality even. Obviously, if a man isn't into S&M and his lover is, and they meet up for the first time and his lover breaks out chains and whips and everything else, that may kill the erection right away, putting him into a stress response, versus other types of contexts where slight soft massage, whispering in his ear, these things that we normally think about as female-specific responses are absolutely true for men as well. And so you need to be aware of this, guys who are dealing with erection issues and lovers of men who are wanting to help or worried about the fact that their men are not getting erections. Obviously, there's a big piece here. Alcohol is huge. Chronic alcohol use is going to kill erections. And, we have to watch the thing. Well, I only drink moderately. Well, what is moderate? 1 glass of wine could be moderate for one person, could be excessive in terms of erections for the other person. So you want to be aware of that. Also, chronic dieting, over-exercising, reducing macronutrients and things like that can relate to issues with erections. So you want to take care of the brain response and understand that. You also want to understand what's going on biochemically and realizing that nitric oxide is huge for erections, and you want to make sure that you're giving your body plenty of the materials it needs to make adequate nitric oxide. This is where arginine and perhaps even better citrulline amino acids come in, as well as lots of green leafy vegetables to get the nitrate concentration up in the foods that you're eating and in the salivary ducts so that those bacteria in the mouth can help the body make nitric oxide. Also getting your testosterone levels checked, but more importantly, your free testosterone to estrogen ratio. And some men may need to go on TRT to repair their erections. However, I bring that issue up because there's many people who are on TRT who are stressed out and sort of disappointed, rather, in the fact that they're not getting erection quality enhancement because testosterone and estrogen are probably the two that you have to look at, or maybe they have missed this nitric oxide component. Obviously, Viagra and Cialis and the PDE5 inhibitor drugs. I discussed how they work and how they can be useful. One final thing I'll say there is tadalafil Cialis has actually been shown recently to potentially be an aid for exercise performance. It increases lung function. It also seems to perhaps in this one study have some muscle building and some fat burning effects at the 5 milligram per day dose. There's two ways to dose Cialis. One is to do a 20 milligram dose and it works over the weekend, or a 5 milligram daily dose. In this particular study, a 5 milligram daily dose increased exercise performance, aided fat loss for men. And so that's a really nice effect for those of us who are looking for enhancement of penile performance and some performance benefits in the gym, as well as some body comp performance. Cialis may be something that you want to look at there. And then, of course, blood flow, which is really about exercising the penis, through more erections give you more erections. Increased blood flow heals the penis, using some of these therapies that might be causing some of this percussive passive exercise for the penis, and also dramatically attacking some of these things that damage the penis. High blood pressure is notorious. High blood sugar is notorious. This is why being obese and diabetic is absolutely huge for erections, and understanding that with the morning erection, if you're getting good, strong morning erections, this might point to the fact that this is a brain effect and not a biochem or blood flow effect. So hopefully all this helps you for understanding erections, both men and women. So I'm going to end here, and I've been rambling on a little bit for a bit, but definitely give me some feedback on this one. Come on over to Instagram, tag me in your story. Let me know what you think about the erection, podcast. And for you women, I'm thinking about doing, maybe some sexual issues with women as well. I think these things can be very helpful for individuals, and it's not something that's always talked about. So hopefully that's useful for you guys, and I will see you guys at the next podcast. Pop it in real quick just to say thank you so much for your interest and support of the JadeTeta.com podcast. I am bringing back by popular demand the live Q&A calls I used to do back in the day, where you can get on live with me, ask your question directly, and have me answer it in full. Questions about thyroid and adrenal health, autoimmune disease, any health condition, belly fat, muscle building, performance enhancement, you name it, we are going to cover it on the Q&A podcast. If you'd like to be on these live Q&A calls with me and speak to me directly, all you need to do is become a patron of the podcast. You can go to www.patreon.com/Jade Teta. That's www.patreon.com/Jade Teta. Become a patron of the podcast. I would greatly appreciate your support, and you'll be able to access me live to answer all your questions in depth. Thanks again for your support. See you on the podcast.